Welcome to Houston Climate Action Week. I'm Peter Kelly Detweiler, Director of Educational Programs for Smart Energy Decisions. And today, our panel is going to be talking about Reinventing Cities, the Sunnyside Landfill Solar Farm. And with me, I have the distinct pleasure of having three individuals who are dealing with this project from different aspects. But first, I've got Paul Curran, who's the founder and managing director of BQ Energy. And then I have the pleasure of having Lindsay Williams, lead planner for Complete Communities for the City of Houston. And then Reverend Stephanie Wilkins, who's a community member at Sunnyside. If you would kindly introduce yourselves, I'll start with Stephanie, actually. If you could, Stephanie, kindly introduce yourself for a minute or two, what you do in Sunnyside and generally how you're tied to the project. And then after that, I'll ask Lindsay and Paul. So Stephanie, Reverend Stephanie, we'll start with you, please.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Stephanie Wilkins. I am a reverend. I am a member of Blue Ridge United Methodist Church, which is on Reed Road, which is right in the heart of Sunnyside. And I've been a member there for 23 years. And my ties to Sunnyside are both personal with my father's side of the family coming to reside in Sunnyside many years ago, and I still have cousins who live right in the midst of Sunnyside. And then also mine is a call to outreach and social justice. And so I met with our honorary mayor of Sunnyside, Sandra Massey Hines, a number of years ago when I started a charter school there, and we maintained our connection. And so she's very much about anything that will enhance the lives of the seniors, the homeless, and all of those who she serves and advocates for. And so she called me in a couple of years ago to a meeting, and the meeting turned into what we are now calling the Sunnyside Energy Trust. And so I am one of the committee members of that trust. And so I am wanting to advocate and support anything that will bring positive change to Sunnyside.
Thank you. And we're really looking forward to hearing your perspective on this project as we roll through the conversation. Lindsay, would you kindly introduce yourselves and what you do for the city and how you're tied into this?
Sure, no problem. My name is Lindsay Williams. I am the lead planner for the Sunnyside Complete Communities, and what the Complete Communities initiative is all about. We are focused on improving neighborhoods and for all of Houston residents and business owners, but we also want to make sure that we provide access to quality services and amenities in underserved communities or historically underserved communities. We've had over the past year a multitude of community meetings where we create a working action plan, and throughout that plan, many of the residents expressed the desire for the Sunnyside Solar Farm. They're interested in the jobs, they're interested in the benefits, they're definitely interested in the cost savings that could occur for their bills. So that's how I'm tied into all of this. In terms of Complete Communities, we like to help the residents reach their fullest potential and bring in any investment in the community that we can to do that.
I can imagine that as a very fascinating, challenging at times, and often highly rewarding job.
Yes, it's very rewarding. Over the past year, we've reached out to over 1,000 residents in the area. Sunnyside is so full of energy and life and residents that really want improvement and change. And the city is committed to making sure that we can fulfill those needs, especially in an area that's been neglected by so many in the past.
Well, it sounds like an exciting project. And Paul, you're obviously involved in helping bring it to fruition physically. Can you introduce yourself, please, and explain what your role is in this whole undertaking?
Sure, Peter. My name is Paul Curran. I'm the managing director of BQ Energy. We're a renewable energy development company. We're a bit different than most renewable energy companies in that we only work on brownfields and landfill sites. That is, we go looking for sites that have a history, that have been something before, or that really aren't suitable for other development. Historically, we've developed the largest wind farm inside of an urban location, and the largest solar farm that exists inside of an urban location, both on brownfields and landfills. The wind farm in Buffalo, New York, the largest solar farm on a landfill is in Annapolis, Maryland. Our job is really to do everything that normally would be done with an energy project. That is interconnection studies with the electrical company, with permitting, et cetera, et cetera. But then we have to do it on Broadway, if you will. We have to do it where people are. So our cooperation and our relationship with Lindsay and Stephanie is very, very important, because here we're going to be impacting a number of lives in a positive way, we think. But those impacts have to be managed and thought through very, very carefully. Typically, many developers look at a 25-mile radius of around their farm to kind of go and drive out and meet the ranchers that might be within that radius. Within 25 miles, as the crow flies of Sunnyside, you'll be out by Katy in Texas. There's millions and millions of people within that bandwidth and so forth. So it's important for us to make sure that we are aligned with the community, and that we look through and have that aspect of this project development, as well as all the normal things such as financing, electrical, and design, and that kind of thing. So that's our role.
Sounds like a unique skill set, combining both the cultural and the sociological piece with the highly technical work.
It's a fun skill set, though. It makes the project very rewarding, as you said.
I would imagine. Before we get into the details of the project, and I had a chance to go back through the Q&A and look at some of the technical information, which is really good, and I recommend people to go on to the City of Houston Climate Action Plan, and on the website there is a whole description of the Sunnyside project with Q&A just from June 20th, so it's really recent information, very helpful. Before we go into the detail, Reverend Stephanie, could you talk a little bit more about Sunnyside? You mentioned you've been involved in that community for a long time. What's the neighborhood and the community like? What are the unique concerns that are shared by the people who live there?
Thank you. Sunnyside is a community of its legacy. There are a lot of families, there are a lot of people who have been there for generations. They have always, to me, it's always been very close-knit, very much about one another, looking out for one another. It is, if not the oldest, one of the oldest African-American communities. I remember growing up seeing cowboys. I mean, people actually riding their horses up and down the street. And I promise you, if you go on a Saturday or Sunday now, you can still see some people riding horses. There are ranches there. There are people who are very much tied to the land there. The complexion of Sunnyside has changed to some degree, because there have been a lot of people and businesses that have moved out of Sunnyside. And so one of the concerns I would say is for the seniors. They have a lot of needs, healthcare needs. There are needs for housing, but also in terms of their bills, being able to sustain themselves. And so energy, the idea of someone coming in and helping to lower costs and then helping them to sustain themselves, I know that is a great need in Sunnyside.
Thank you. And when we were talking about this project a month or even before, because the hurricane came in and intervened, you talked about a certain sensitivity and skepticism from a community that has often been on the short end of the stick in terms of, well, the dump was located, the landfill was located there, and it hasn't been treated historically very well. Can you talk a little bit about some of those sensitivities that, you know, Paul and Lindsay and others obviously need to be aware of, and how you navigate some of those challenges?
Well, okay, let's just say there is a landfill in this community, whereas someone thought that was okay to put it in this community as opposed to putting it into another community. So the idea that it was okay to dump in Sunnyside and not somewhere else, we have had elected officials, we've had people come in and make promises of wanting to help, wanting to come alongside, wanting to support, and it falls short. We don't see them again, we don't hear from them again, or if they come into the community and the promise is that they're going to utilize the people in Sunnyside, that somehow does not happen. We're asked to believe, we're asked to trust, and a lot of times it does not come to fruition the way that it is presented to us. And so, yes, we would be skeptical of big corporations, big companies coming in saying, hey, we want to fix this. We've seen it before in other communities, in that the fixing of the community somehow translates to those who live there being moved out. Mm-hmm. What we want in Sunnyside is to know that you're going to come in and walk with us, support us, and help us to sustain us. We don't want to be moved out, rolled over, cemented, and just removed. So if you're coming into Sunnyside, we're asking that you come in first wanting to do the thing you say you're going to do, and that is give us energy, give us something that is sustainable, give us something that we ourselves can use, be a part of, work with you in the construction phase of it, help educate us on the different ways of sustaining ourselves, and help us to come back to what Sunnyside has been in the past and can be again.
Thank you. So Lindsay, there's this cultural scar tissue, if you will, from all those decades of neglect and in some cases false promises. And then you're coming in there working with the city to try and realize this big promise with lots of potential. How do you navigate those challenges and communicate what the benefits are to a community that does have some legitimate concerns about how they will be treated? What are the biggest challenges being from the city and being the intermediary in that?
The city fully acknowledges that in the past they have not necessarily been the greatest asset to Sunnyside, and that there is a disservice in the community, and that is the exact reason why Mayor Turner created the Complete Communities in the first place, because he really wanted to make sure that the city was a true partner in making sure we revitalize and invest in the communities the way they are. We're not trying to come in and push anyone out. We do an extensive community outreach process for over a year when we're trying to figure out what are your goals, not coming in and pushing our plans and agendas, but what are your goals? What is a priority to you? And the Sunnyside Solar Farm project was huge and top on the list. It always came up in our meetings. Dory Wolf made several presentations. There were several proposals. The mayor approved the proposal for the Sunnyside Solar and the Ag Hub. So the city is working very closely to remedy those past errors, or those past maybe transgressions that have occurred with our relationship with the area, and working diligently to make sure we bring in investments, but the right investments, the right partnership, and doing what we can in terms of land or advertisement or marketing or leasing or meetings, however we can serve as a partner, and seeking out the correct partners to make sure these things come to light. We also have a neighborhood support team that is full of trusted advisors, Sandra Massey-Hines. There's also several civic groups that are involved, and we make sure that we're reaching out to those neighborhood trusted advisors, the churches, our neighborhood support team, and that we are truly partnering all together to make sure these things come to light.
That's quite a significant level of trust that must be built.
Yes.
I'm sure and the communication must take place in a whole bunch of different ways. Is it mostly face-to-face meetings, or what are the main ways that you get the word out?
No, we've had several different types of meetings, especially in the midst of COVID. So we've had in-person meetings, 5 very large public meetings that we hosted. We also had coffee clutch meetings, which are smaller meetings with neighborhood stakeholders or the TERS or whoever may be the partner in certain areas. We also have had several Zoom meetings, Microsoft Team meetings. We have a ongoing community engagement process on letstalkhouston.org. in which we have our Sunnyside project. Our working action plan draft is there. Anyone who's interested can go and comment, and also anyone in the community who's interested in making sure these projects come to light and holding us accountable and pushing these action items forward can sign up for a working group on letstalkhouston.org.
Thank you. Paul, let's talk a little bit about your background with the Steel Winds project in Buffalo and some of the other work you've done in the brownfields, and then discuss a little bit about the specific attributes of the site. What's, besides what you said before around congested areas in terms of lots of people living there, what are the other big challenges around dealing in brownfields, and what attracted you to that area in the first place?
Well, my background in Houston actually led me there. I worked for Texaco for many years, so I was quite familiar with brownfields and the legacy that they leave. Really, I founded the company BQ Energy about 17, 18 years ago now, after a career in the oil industry. And what I was looking for, we built a wind farm inside of one of our oil refineries in Europe, and it was such a neat idea that I wanted to replicate it. Little known, there's about 180 closed oil refineries in the United States. And I thought, well, 180 oil refineries that are closed, those sites would be great to redevelop. And those skills of what's in the ground and what resources are there are really, applicable to the project in Buffalo, the project in Annapolis, or here. The Sunnyside project is very unique. It's, for those that don't know, it's just south of 610 on the south side of the city. But it's about 250 acres of landfill property, which is enormous. It's one of the largest landfills that I've really worked on. And it's been sitting there, really, it's a site that time has lost for the last 30 years or more, since the 1970s when it was closed. It is a treed site, so it looks like a forest now, that, because very little has happened to the site. People don't go on there, it's fenced off. It is somewhat of a just an eyesore and a dead spot in the community. So our job here, as it was in Annapolis or Columbus or Lackawanna or elsewhere, is to engage with the community. Stephanie mentioned, don't want to hear anybody say, trust me. That's a bad thing to say. And really, at the end, it's really, okay, how did we do? Because we can't do this all by ourselves. We know that, and we've made those mistakes early on other projects. And so we've learned that job one, if you're going to work in a community, is to understand that community. So one of my partners, Doria Wolf, is there every day. And everybody on this call and elsewhere knows her phone number, and she answers those phones quite quickly. And we do make sure that we're not just paying lip service, but understanding what do we have to do and when do we have to do it by. In many ways, the Sunnyside Energy Trust is kind of our board of directors. We have to make sure that they are in line and understanding where we go. And that's just, it's not lip service, it's just good business. We know that at the end of the day, we're going to hit an issue. I don't know what it is today that's going to require some public support. We're going to, need to get a permit from somebody in the city or somebody in the county, wherever, and a couple of letters from the community demonstrating that they like this idea is going to be just like gold. And we know those things are going to be important, and so we're planting those seeds now. And it's not simply the right thing to do, although it is. It's also good business. If you're going to work in a community, it's very, very different than 25 miles from Amarillo. Mm-hmm. Being 5 miles from City Hall in downtown Sunnyside is a unique place, and it's a very different development model that we love working in these communities, but it's a different model that we had to adopt, and we love doing it.
And are the brownfield sites typically, particularly landfills, situated within low-income communities because of the discrimination that has occurred over the last centuries? I mean, is that a typical outcome?
It's not unusual. Yes, environmental justice has, as Stephanie said, the garbage went to Sunnyside in the 1950s and 60s, and that's where it stays, and that's where it is. So this is a landfill. So lots of garbage from the city of Houston was buried there during those years, and it's going to stay there. So our job is to do what we can to redevelop the site. And the best use for this site, and most landfills, frankly, is to redevelop it with renewable energy. From an electrical point of view, there is probably no better site to put 50 megawatts of electrical power in the country than Sunnyside in the city of Houston, because we're building it where the power is needed, as opposed to putting it out in Amarillo or El Paso or someplace in between that nobody's going to be bothered, and then you have to build big power lines to get it across. We are building it where the electricity is really needed, and that's a tremendous asset electrically as well as to the community.
Thank you. And Stephanie, you mentioned that the community is looking to get energy from this project. And I noticed in the documents, and we talked about this before, there's a community solar aspect of this. What has that conversation been like in the community with the people you talked to, Stephanie, around the community solar piece? And would they get a fractional output of the project? How does that work?
In the conversations that I've been a part of, it is explaining how it's going to actually happen. They want how it's going to happen. You know, are they going to have to pay for it? Who's going to put it up? It's practical questions, but we see it as something that is very beneficial. It can be very, very beneficial to us. We want to support everybody. I mean, who in their right mind would say no to lower energy bill, a lower electric bill? No, I don't want a lower electric bill. Remain high. Thank you. You know, it's just the how is it going to happen? That's the questions. You know, how is it going to happen? And then there are people who want to know how soon can it happen? You know, can I get mine? You know, put up on the roof now? You know, and so it is just the practical aspect of it and how soon, and you know, qualify for it. They want practical answers.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, yesterday on another panel I moderated, it was around energy and equity, and the statistic that for low-income families, the energy bill can be 10% or more of total income. It's a trade-off between feeding your family and whether you can put your lights on in some instances. So that strikes me as something that would have a high degree of resonance in that community. Paul, how big is the community solar part of this project? How many megawatts is that?
It's 2 megawatts. So it's the entire project, a little over 50. The mayor has made me promise that this will be the largest landfill-based project in the United States, and it will be. We've got several large ones, but it will be the largest. So 2 megawatts is allocated right now for community solar. That power will be allocated to subscribers if they wish, or part of it will go to community members. We're still working through the details of whether that'll be community-based organizations, individuals, etc., and how that will be allocated. And frankly, that's a decision will be made in unison with the Sunnyside Energy Trust, of which Stephanie is a member. So we're working through those things, but 2 megawatts is a pretty large, and frankly larger than any solar project which exists in Houston today. So it's a nice start in that direction.
How many homes could that serve roughly?
Probably about 3,000 or 4,000. Depends on the.
That's
it's a big number.
That's pretty good. Lindsay, in looking at the project, there were some other really interesting things I noticed. That there were buffer zones with trees in between the panels and walking paths and some really other interesting aspects. So what else is involved in terms of the amenities that make it more than just a community solar project, but a real asset to the community in other ways as well? And how is that conversation unfolded?
So there was a proposal submitted for the Sunnyside Solar Farm, but in addition to that, an ag hub building to where the community, Sunnyside is home of the urban farmer, or at least they like to claim that, as we mentioned before. So the ag hub building would also serve some agricultural needs. The community will be able to use that green space, walk around, learn how to grow. Hydroponic planting is involved. I'm not a farmer, but there are tons of opportunities on the site in terms of food growth and interacting with the site itself, and really redeveloping this eyesore and sad part of Sunnyside history into something that's really phenomenal.
Great, thank you. Projects like these can serve as catalysts for training and for jobs creation. Paul, can you talk a little bit about how this might actually stimulate the capability to create professionals that then can go out into the world and and earn a steady income after this project is over. What's the thinking around that so far?
Yeah, let me sort of surprise you that there's going to be a lot more solar in the future than there is today. It is a growth business. And when you identify a growth business, training people to do those types of jobs is very, very important. The other part that's not surprising is that, we need a lot of people that can be apprentice electricians and other construction workers on our site. And the third piece I would say is that there's a lot of people that want to do those jobs that currently live in the Sunnyside neighborhood. So putting those three facts together, this is just, again, common sense from our point of view. We can, within a few months' time, have a training program set up. We've done it elsewhere around the country to basically train individuals to be apprentice electricians that can work on our job and move through. That'll be, the construction phase from start to finish might be a year. And that's great work for a year, but what do you do after that? And of course, once they've been trained on the electrical skills they need here, somebody mentioned a second ago that there aren't very many solar panels on people's roofs in low-income community. Well, there could be. And that's a great way to basically train people to start up businesses to do that. Once they've got the skills, they really can go forward into an industry which is going to grow in Texas or really anywhere around the country. But in the Sunnyside neighborhood in particular, we'll have a whole host of electrical firms that can sprout out of here. On other jobs that we've done this before, it frankly gives us a source of labor, which is easier for us, and a local source of labor, which is just, they're more reliable if they live down the street. Obviously, it makes a lot of sense. But we love it when we go back 3 or 4 years later and we see 5 electrical shops that have sprouted out of a job that we've worked on and so forth. It just makes the job really what we want to see. So the combination of knowing that there's going to be a growth market, people are willing to invest their time in a training program, and then that those job skills can really move on out once they've finished building Sunnyside successfully. For decades to come, you can have people installing solar panels in this community, elsewhere in Houston, obviously.
That thinking strikes me as spot on. I know in the ERCOT and the Electric Reliability Council of Texas interconnection queue, they're looking at tens of thousands of megawatts, utility scale, but then there will also be all this rooftop. And I was listening to a webcast 2 weeks ago with some of the largest developers in the country, and they say that what is slowing them down now, they don't have enough qualified labor.
That's right.
Electricians. So it seems like it's a really big booming market. Stephanie, what's the conversation been like in the community around the potential for jobs and, going to work locally and then spreading out from there afterwards? People must be somewhat enthusiastic about that possibility, I would think.
Very, very enthusiastic. And so that goes back to what we talked about earlier when we say that people come in and give us the hope that something's going to take place and that we are going to be the beneficiaries of it. And so they want it. We want it. We want to not only have lower costs in electrical bills, but we want something that we can be a part of, something that we can help build. And once we get that training, once we're doing what we need to do, going back and training others, bringing other people in, we want that. Excited about the aspect of being able to work. There are places in the community that are training people right now. We have on Reed Road a Work-Faith Connection, which works out of Star of Hope. And so it is like a job boot camp. And so I know that they would be excited to be able to place those people who they are training for positions in their community. So very excited about the prospect of someone coming along and giving us the opportunity to support ourselves and to grow and build.
Thank you, Lindsay. That sounds like having that trained workforce would feed very nicely into the goals of the Climate Action Plan in the years and decades to come. Is that a fastball down the middle from your perspective?
We love it. We think it's excellent. We love for the community to be empowered and to really get the skills and job training that they need. So we think it's a great plan, and it perfectly aligns with the Climate Action Plan that's in place.
And now someone actually commented in the questions, and it sounds like a perfect time to bring this in. The EPA has a training program to train local residents in the work of brownfields. Have nonprofits or other groups been involved with you in conversations, not only for Sunnyside, but more in general around how they can interact with the climate action plan and what the employment impacts are there?
So I would imagine they've been in contact with the climate action plan with the office or the mayor's office of complete communities. In terms of just Sunnyside, I have not had those conversations, but I would imagine they have occurred in other areas.
Thank you. And Paul, what's the timeline for the project right now? If all things go well, what hurdles remain? And then in a perfect world, when do you get steel in the ground?
Sure. You know, the hardest thing with any project of this nature when you're working with communities and you do it early and so forth is patience. Because it does take a while. The steps that have to happen that have not happened yet are getting the permits from the state of Texas to work on a landfill. There's a very intricate work plan that has to be developed to take a landfill, which is, like I said, just a dump of garbage with a lot of trees that have grown over the years, and turn that into a solar farm. That's a process that requires very careful planning and very careful approvals. And actually, we'll be getting proposals in to do that work, I think this Friday, actually. So over the next several months, we'll be working with the state of Texas and the city, of course, to develop a work plan. And then the long lead item is surprising in the sense that we have to get permission from the Electric Reliability Council of Texas, ERCOT as it's known, to interconnect. And that can be a very tedious process because they treat everybody the same, which is of course fair, but they're used to working with projects out in West Texas, trying to get their power over to the city of Houston. And that's the way power flows, of course, right, is from out there to the city of Houston. And here we are sitting in the middle of Houston. So we're hopeful that we can accelerate that process with some common sense. The city has certainly promised to help us work with CenterPoint to see how quickly that process can go. But to answer your question, that after a long introduction, we're hoping to start construction in 2022. And we've promised the mayor that we will be, he'll be able to cut the ribbon before he leaves office.
That would be wonderful. Okay, so you mentioned trees. And the project, I think you said that the landfill was closed down in the 70s. So those trees are 40 or 50 years old, some of them. How big are they and what do you do with them? I mean, do you rip them right out or do you cut them down? What's the best way to deal with that?
So the surprising part of that is rip them right out would disturb the garbage which is underneath.
Which has
so our approach is to top them off at ground level and leave the roots there. And the roots will eventually die, of course, but we'll be designing around the tree stumps as they go. And that's not unusual in our case. We're used to having things sticking out of landfills. Usually there's vents and so forth that are in a landfill surface. But the biggest challenge from a technical point of view over time is to figure out what exactly is there. What does the surface and the ground look like? Because it is covered with trees. So doing things as simple as surveying and so forth is possible now. But trying to imagine how much regrading will be technically possible and environmentally safe to do and so forth are things that we'll be working on over the coming months. But the trees will be gone for sure. Although we are environmentally friendly in nature. As a solar company, we kind of hate trees because they cast shade on our panels. We don't like that. We're not terribly fond of birds either for obvious reasons. But we do, in this case, we will be removing the trees, which were never planted there. They just sprouted up naturally over time.
How many panels will be in the project? General
about 175,000 panels, which are the same panels that you might put on your house, just a lot more of them.
Okay, and steel racks and inverters and that sort of thing. All right, so Stephanie, I'm going to turn to you now. All this equipment has to come in. What's the concern in the community in terms of trucks bringing in equipment and that sort of thing? And how has that conversation unfolded?
Well, honestly, I've not been privy to a lot of those conversations, but just me as a member of the community, my concern would be, okay, how are you going to manage the in and the out of it? Is there going to be disruption in traffic? Is there going to be, these detours or roads cut off, so we have even less access to what we need in terms of transportation or getting around? Because a lot of people, public transportation is their number one way, taxis, walking, so being cut off from certain places would make it kind of arduous for them to try to get around. So how do you manage the necessary movement that needs to take place to get the equipment in, and then understanding that you might limit our access to what we need?
Paul, how do you mitigate those impacts so that Stephanie's comfortable?
Well,
Right.
and the real answer is we sit down with Stephanie and the other members of the Sunnyside Trust to go through plans as those are developed. The good news is that this is a urban area, so there's lots of highways nearby, so we will be able to get things to the site relatively straightforward. And the other good news is it's 250 acres, so we have a lot of what we call laydown area. So we'll bring in panels on reasonably large trucks so that there's one truck instead of 50 little trucks, if you will, and we'll try to bring those down, lay them down in a certain area, and then bring them out to the location of the site as we're able to. So it is certainly going to be traffic. People that are going to be workers will be driving pickup trucks to the site. We have to find a way for them to park. So there will be, people going to work on the site. That's an incredibly strong positive because they'll be having jobs on the site, but there is a little bit of a negative in the sense that, more people working in the area means a little bit more traffic as well. So those types of issues where we're trading things off and so forth is exactly the type of thing where we sit down with our advisors from the Sunnyside Energy Trust to say, here's what we're wrestling with. What are your thoughts?
Thank you. And then are there things like indigenous vegetation and, green stormwater components to address runoff and those sorts of issues as well to optimize, to mitigate the potential negative impacts and optimize the positive ones? What's the planning around that piece of it?
Absolutely. There's we'll be, again, we don't want to create shade on the site, but around the boundary of the site, we'll be doing some vegetation planting. We typically do so that it frankly looks better, and it's also something that will allow for a little bit more privacy and security and so forth. We'll be repairing the fence that has been kind of in disrepair around the property over time and so forth. And we'll certainly be respecting the fact there is a park in one corner and a community center. We'll be trying to work with those facilities. And the community center, I think the plan is that we'll be installing car chargers and other battery systems to make sure that they have a little bit more economic and reliable source of energy.
Thank you. And Lindsay, somebody asked the question while we were talking, is there a visual plan about Sunnyside Solar Farm? I saw one on your climate action plan. I think I Googled climate action plan Sunnyside, and there was a really great visual rendering. Is that the best place for people to go?
Yes, if you go to the Houston Climate Action Plan, there is a visual and rendering of the actual site in the proposal.
And then all the great Q&A as well, which I thought was really helpful in elucidating some of the details on that.
Yes, there's a lot of questions that can be answered on that site.
Thanks. And what about pollinator friendly, Paul? I think we're seeing more and more of this, what do they call it, agrivoltaics, where folks are integrating vegetation for bees, et cetera. Any of those things possible with this project?
We'll see is the answer.
Okay.
What'll be important when we start taking the trees down, the trees will die, of course, the roots and so forth, is to make sure that we stabilize the ground. So we'll be planting grasses on the site. Oftentimes, pollinator-friendly plants have deep roots, and the landfill regulators are not terribly fond of having more plants that with deep roots kind of go into the garbage layer and so forth. So we'll work with but TCEQ, the Texas Commission on Environmental Quality, to see what their thoughts on pollinator friendly will be. Oftentimes we found on other landfills around the country that pollinator friendly plants and landfills don't always go hand in hand. So we'll certainly look at it. We're going to plant something, whether it's a good grass that's compatible with the climate, or whether it's a pollinator-friendly plant or not, we'll figure that out as we work with the state.
Thanks. That's an interesting, subtle nuance on landfill sites that I don't think would be apparent to everybody.
This is unusual, by the way. That oftentimes landfills have what's called a geomembrane about 2 feet down. This one does not, but on those sites, pollinator-friendly would be completely not allowed.
Okay, because it would go through the membrane potentially.
Correct.
One other question someone asked about landfills, and you discussed the methane before. Do they vent it now? How do they deal with the landfill right now and the methane? And is that an issue that you're going to have to be particularly concerned about?
So we did find that over time, landfills tend to, landfills clearly degrade the garbage that's in there. So if it's paper or whatever, it'll degrade over time. Typically, that degradation will kind of peter out they call it burp out, if you will, over about 15 years. So in this case, where the landfill was closed in the 70s, there'll be very little methane generation. There are periodic measurements being done now by the city and reported to CCEQ, and they've not had a detectable level of methane from those reports. But during construction, we'll be working on the site a lot more. We will be required to monitor methane and any other air quality issues on the site as we're working on it. We do not expect that there'll be any methane of significance still being generated because the landfill is so old.
Great, thank you. So, Lindsay, you've been involved in this for a little while. We're getting close to wrapping up here, and most of the questions have come in. Success to you would look like, you know, say looking back 5 years from now, if someone said, "Oh, what made that project great?" How would you describe that? You know, what success would look like?
I think success to us would be an empowered community. Job training would come in, lower energy bills, and Sunnyside would have a project that they are proud of and that the world knows about. Also, success would be that a large company comes in and, you know, buys the energy that is getting produced on this site. We would love, love, love for a partner to help bring this project to fruition. We really think it could be a pivotal point for the Sunnyside community. So that would definitely be a huge success marker for us. And in terms of the website, I just want to give the appropriate one. It's greenhoustontx.gov. If anybody is looking for renderings of the project, and they can also check out the solarunitedneighbors.com website as well. For Sunnyside.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you. Paul, you've done a bunch of these projects before. This one's unique. What would success look like from your perspective, looking back, say 5 years from now?
Oh, it's always hard to measure. Obviously, I was thinking about that as you talked about the wind farm that we did in Lackawanna, New York. And if you go to the Lackawanna website, the crest of the city of Lackawanna has a local icon named Father Baker on it. And right behind Father Baker in their crest are 5 wind turbines. That's success. If the Sunnyside community is that proud of this project, you know, in 5 years' time, then we did our job. And that's really what we're looking for. You know, we're all about, we're kind of nerdy here. We like making electricity, and we talk about, you know, photovoltaic cells and all that kind of stuff. But when the community kind of adopts the project as their own, then we did our job right.
Thank you. And Stephanie, you're the one who lives there, and you know all the people. You know, from your perspective, what is a home run from, you know, this project? If you describe it as best it could be.
I was sitting and thinking when you all were sharing, and so I echo a lot of what Lindsay and Paul have already said. What success is going to look like is that it is a project that the community has embraced, taken hold of, and become an integral part of. But I thought about it for a minute, and I said, not only would it be great if we could bring the solar energy in, but if we could somehow translate that to re-energizing the community and the people within it, where there's a brightness that comes back to Sunnyside, just the name itself. You know, if we could get back to that, what I remember as a young girl, there are people in this community that love this community, will fight to the death for this community, because we're not going down easy. If you again. Okay, so if the energy that is brought in could somehow be connected, not beyond just the electricity, but revitalizing, re-energizing, repurposing, giving people what I feel they deserve. They deserve to have someone come in, do what they said they were going to do, and help us to be what we know we can be. We are Sunnyside proud, and we're not ashamed to tell you.
Reverend Stephanie, all I can say is amen to that.
There you go.
Thank you so much. Now, before I let you all go, because we're running close to the end of things here, it's the Climate Action Plan. Plans don't happen without people. motivated people getting up and doing the hard work. And so your call to action, who are watching this right now, whether live or recorded, go to greenhoustontx.gov. Find out what's happening in your city. And if you're at all interested and excited about it, talk to these folks, get involved, make your city the energy capital of the world in a new way, in a clean way, in a sustainable way, in a way that Reverend Stephanie was just talking about that enlightens all of us. Thank you all so much. I've really enjoyed this conversation. I'm sure the folks who've been watching have as well, and I will be paying close attention to the Sunnyside project and can't wait for the day that plug goes into the wall, if you will. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Peter.
Peter.